The Blue Jackets needed to get bigger, tougher, healthier, more experienced on the blue line. Was Ivan Provorov the right choice to do all of those things? We're going to discuss on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, because right now new customers are getting $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So we're talking about Ivan Provorov today, the good, the bad, the ugly of his season. I want to talk a little bit about kind of looking back at the trade. I want to look at his season as a whole, his contract. Like, will he be a Blue Jacket in October? If not, where is he moved to? What will he be moved for? Like, there's a whole bunch of, again, moving parts with Provorov. And I guess let's start up front. Let's be honest. I didn't love this trade when it happened. I didn't love the decision to clog up the blue line even more. And, having looked at how this season has unfolded and some of the other moves that Kekalainen made over last summer, like the Severson move, the Babcock move, all kinds of different things. It felt like he knew that he was on the hot seat, and he made a bunch of, not panic moves necessarily, but he made a lot of moves that thought that he could win now because he was getting impatient. He wanted to speed up the rebuild, and I don't know that it obviously didn't work, because the Blue Jackets were arguably maybe even worse than they were last season. Not quite. They probably were on par with where they were last season, but they certainly didn't take enough steps forward to justify, trading assets for Ivan Provorov. I think they traded a third-round pick for Damon Severson. We'll talk about Damon Severson in a future episode. That's not about him. But, I could have dealt with, one of those two trades. I would have been like, okay, fine. But here we are. They did both of them, and I truly don't get why they decided to make this. I mean, I do understand why they decided to make this trade, but Ivan Provorov, for me, feels like a less good Zach Werenski. And I know that one of the things that the Blue Jackets have struggled with over the past handful of seasons has been keeping players healthy and keeping defensemen specifically healthy. They've just gone through the Ryan Murray. The Adam Boquist can't seem to stay healthy. Zach Werenski's had serious injuries in the past handful of seasons. I get it. You want to bring someone in that before he was with the Blue Jackets, he missed 4 games total when he was with the Flyers over 7 seasons, and he was the only Blue Jacket to play all 82 games this season, I believe. So I get it that he's nothing if not healthy. The problem was, and I think again this comes down to weaknesses on his part and also weaknesses on the coaching staff, is that he was just so badly used this season that it really exacerbated all of the weaknesses in his game. There was a world in which Ivan Provorov's ice time was not, we're going to put him on the penalty kill for 1 million minutes. We're going to put him on the top pairing, and again play him 1 million minutes. We're going to play him in his own zone for 1 million minutes. It's because he's just not suited to it. And you saw flashes of I think his breakout, his first pass out of the zone is fine, but his defending is just not good enough. His defending on the rush was horrific. And for some reason, he just kind of kept being put into these situations that just were not suited to his game. He was great offensively, second on the team in scoring by a defenseman, I believe. Only Zach Werenski had more points than him. Provorov had 32 points in 82 games, which was not his best offensive season, but it also wasn't his worst. His career high is 41 points, but this was his highest total since the 2019-2020 season when he had 36 points with the Flyers. So, Offensively, he was fine. He was a perfectly acceptable offensive defenseman. But the issues I had were with the defense and the fact that, again, he played a billion minutes. So I wanted to go back, and before I kind of really dig into Provorov's game, is I wanted to look at the trade and what the Blue Jackets sent where. So it was a three-way trade. So the Flyers traded Kevin Connaughton, Hayden Hodgson, and Ivan Provorov to the LA Kings in return for Cal Peterson, Sean Walker, Helga Grans, and a second-round pick. They then traded they then, from the Blue Jackets, got a first-round pick, which turned into Oliver Bonk, who had a really good season with the London Knights this year, 22nd overall, and a conditional second-round pick, which we won't know until after the Blue Jackets are done with the first day of the draft. Whether they're keeping it or they're sending it next year. So the Blue Jackets might pick fourth overall, and then they might not pick again until like the start of the third round if they decide that they want to give up the second round pick now and get it over and done with. And then the Blue Jackets acquired from the LA Ivan Provorov at 70%, I believe. The Kings retained 30% of his contract for the next 2 seasons. So Blue Jackets gave up a first-round pick and a second-round pick for Ivan Provorov, which, like, that to me feels like a little bit of an overpay. If that second-round pick becomes, like, if they kick it to the curb next year and it becomes like 40 overall, 50 overall, like, fine, like, it feels a little bit better. But to me, it felt like paying assets for something that you didn't need at the time, and a trade that really hasn't worked out. Which is frustrating. Obviously, a lot of these trade analyses are kind of in hindsight, oh, well, if we'd known he wasn't going to be very good defensively, then maybe we wouldn't have traded for him. But here we are. He's on the team. He'll probably be on the team in October, although I kind of wish he wouldn't be. And I don't think that the trade was all that great, especially if, they came out and they immediately acquired Damon Severson to then re-sign Damon Severson for the next 8 years, despite the fact that he was 28 at the time. So they have him until he's 36. They already haven't got a ton of cap space because, like, we talked about this in Friday's episode, I want to say, where they have $24 million to get Patrick Laine back into the lineup, and then also give new contract to Chinakhov, Marchenko, Sillinger, Nylander, Kent Johnson, Texier, and Jake Bean, and like there's just not enough room for all of that. But if they can manage to shift Provorov's contract, that gives them an extra just over $4.5 million if they don't have to retain on it. But we'll talk about that in a second. So, like, admittedly, I feel like, and like I'm okay with saying this, like, I was kind of not biased against Provorov before he even started, but he was certainly not, like, he started on a downward. He started on, the very bottom of my expectations. And so, like, in one way, I had no expectations for him. So, like, how did he disappoint? But on the other hand, like, yep, no, I was right. This trade wasn't great. The play style doesn't match. And now here we are. I want to dig into kind of his play style a little bit more and how kind of we saw from him, like I said, flashes of good things, but mostly it was him being put in situations that he was not suited to play in. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Before we do that, though, I've got to tell you all about FanDuel because it's winner-take-all time in the NBA and the NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 that you can use to bet on spreads, moneyline, player props, and more. So, like, honestly, my advice, go to FanDuel.com, find the heaviest favorite that you can, whether that's the Denver Nuggets winning in the NBA, whether that's gosh, I think the only, I don't know that I would put money either way on the Canucks or the Oilers being the heavy favorite in that matchup, but like just find the heaviest favorite you can. It doesn't have to be the NBA or the NHL. It can be literally anything. And if you win, you're going to get $150 that you can spend on literally whatever you want at FanDuel.com. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every playoff shot count. Once again, FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to Locked on Blue Jackets. We're talking about Ivan Provorov today, who did not have a great season for the Blue Jackets. He was about what I expected him to be, which, like, whether you can decide for yourselves what that means in terms of whether he was good or bad or what I expected from him. But looking at this, if I'm on moneypuck.com and I'm just adjusting for players that played over 100 minutes, because that gets rid of like the Brindley, the Del Bobbaloo, the Malatesta that played for, like 25 minutes to get like 25 minutes max. And if you look at like the percentage of shift starts in the defensive zone, the two defensemen that started in the defensive zone the most were Eric Branson, which makes sense. He is more of a shutdown guy, and Ivan Provorov, who is decidedly not a shutdown guy. On the flip side, when you go to the percentage of shift starts in the offensive zone for defensemen, he was, I believe, looking at, again, minimum 100 minutes, so not taking into account players that, again, only played for like 5 minutes. Boquist, Werenski, Jiricek, Severson, Blankenberg, all ahead of him. Ivan Provorov only started 9.2% of his shifts in the offensive zone. So what that means is he was only on the ice for under 10% of the face-offs that took place in the offensive zone. That to me feels like extreme mismanagement of ostensibly one of the better offensive defensemen on the team, and the Blue Jackets struggled with offense from the D this season, like massively. And this is a team that should be providing more, but of the defensemen, like Werenski, great, 57 points in 70 games. Provorov, 32 points in 82 games. Severson, 28 points in 67 games. Gabranson, 26 points in 78 games. Bean, 13 points in 72 games, and Boquist, 10 points in 35 games. And those were your kind of top 10, your top 6 scoring defensemen. David Jiricek also had 10 points in 43 games. So, like, and then if you go to goals, like, they just weren't getting any scoring from the defenseman. Like, again, Zach Werenski led the way, 11 goals. Damon Severson, 9 goals. Provorov, 5 goals. Bean, 4 goals. Branson also had 6 goals. Like, they just weren't getting scoring from the defenseman, and that feels like, to me, something that Provorov specifically could have helped out on. Like, Zach Werenski should have had 20 goals this season. He was shooting at a catastrophically low shooting percentage for most of the season. But Provorov was shooting at around about a percentage, like 1.2% below his career average. And scored like the fewest goals of his entire career. Like he scored 6 goals in his rookie season and 6 goals last season with the Flyers. He only scored 5 this season with the Blue Jackets. So like, and he was shooting at like basically the same he's been shooting at his entire career. Like there was like a couple of outliers. He was shooting at over 8% in years that he had 13 and 17 goals, but like the dude knows how to score. And it's frustrating to me that he wasn't ever really put in a position to use that offense. I want to try and if I can pull up the power play, which again, the power play was miserable this season, but of the apparently only 4 defensemen played more than 25 minutes on the power play this season: Werenski, Boquist, Provorov, and Severson. Ivan Provorov played. Oh, I closed it down. God damn it. Ivan Provorov played basically no playoff time, no power play time, which again, so frustrating because he is a very good power play guy. He's a very good, and I've talked about this with Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. Okay, so we played like the second most minutes of the defense on the team. So we played 121 minutes, but he was on that second unit a lot, and that second unit just wasn't getting the reps. It wasn't getting anything. Like he 24% of the shift starts in the offensive zone on the power play belonged to Ivan Provorov. Compare that to 65% with Zach Werenski. And partially that's because Provorov was on the second power play unit. And so, like, that typically starts on the fly. I feel like it's pretty rare for the unit to shift after a stoppage in play mid power play. It still happens, but it just felt like they could have used that offense. They could have used that shot, and they just decided not to. He had 6 power play points all season in 82 games. He was expected to score 1.2 goals, scored 0. And just, I don't know, I feel like he could have been used so much more efficiently than he actually was, which again, we go back to coaching. They decided that Ivan Provorov was going to be a penalty killer, and nothing anyone said was going to change that. Like, he played the second most power penalty kill minutes on the team by a minute. Eric Branson played 218, Provorov played 217. Like, that was their top penalty kill unit. And it frustrates me to no end. Like, I don't like, if that had been for me, I would have literally just taken Provorov off the penalty kill and put him on the power play. And like, just that's what I would have done. And we would have probably, I'd probably be talking about him a lot more positively in that case. And so, like, is that maybe that's unfair to Provorov himself for judging him for saying, hey, why weren't you on the power play? Like, it's not his fault. He wasn't going to be like, hey, I want to play on the power play more. I don't want to play on the penalty kill. He's going to give he's going to take the ice time that the coach gives him, you know? But it just felt like he didn't help himself by playing the way that he did, even though that was the ice time that was given to him, which maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. But I cannot count how many times I was watching the game and there would be a goal and there would be someone who blew coverage, and I would look and every single time be like, oh, it's Ivan Provorov. Of course it's Ivan Provorov. Like, he really struggled in his own zone this season. And it's extremely frustrating to watch because I do genuinely think that there is, like, extremely good offense in there. He just didn't ever really get a chance to do anything about it. Ever. Like, he's very good at drawing penalties. I will give him that. He, I believe, was second on the team in defense. Here's a fun stat that we'll probably talk about in a little bit more detail when we talk about Adam Boquist. He drew 4 penalties this season, and didn't take any of his own. So good job him. But like, and again, Provorov was third on the team in blocking shots. He shouldn't be blocking shots. He just shouldn't. That's not a player that I want to be blocking shots. You know, he gave the puck away a lot in the defensive zone. He just wasn't very good in his own zone, which is frustrating because he was really good in the offensive zone and he just wasn't there ever. And I think partially that's coaching styles. I think partially that's that the team wasn't very good. I will say this: Ivan Provorov played much better when he was playing with a younger defenseman. And I wonder if that's because that made him play a little bit more kind of conservatively and a little bit more kind of reserved. There was much less kind of failing, like blowing the zone and just failing to cover. He wasn't like caught in the offensive zone and like after stupid pinches, which I saw a lot from him this season as well. And it felt like he was playing a lot more of a restrained game when he was playing with someone like David Jiricek. I liked that combo a lot. I think because it gave Jiricek a chance to kind of step up and try more things because Provorov stepped back a little bit. When he was playing with guys like Severson, or, you know, he played with Gabranson for parts of the season, like those were kind of, the Severson-Provorov pairing was fine. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. The Provorov-Gabranson pairing was an active disaster because neither of them were fast enough to get back in time, but Provorov just kept on acting like his defense partner would handle everything and everything would be fine, you know? So that's kind of that was the big frustration for me with Provorov, was that it felt like he was never in the right place at the right time. But I don't know how much of that is attributed to like his hockey sense and how much of it is just that he was put into positions where like no one was going to succeed, or no one that had his kind of toolkit was going to succeed, you know? It's like it would be like expecting, and I'm not comparing these two players at all, but it would be like expecting Erik Karlsson to suddenly become an extremely competent penalty killer, despite the fact that he is a very obviously an offensive defenseman. And I'm not saying that Karlsson and Provorov are comparable players at all, but that's kind of how I feel about it. Is if you have an offensive defenseman, and this is kind of the stuff that we saw with Patrick Laine last season with Brad Larson, was we really want Patrick Laine to be a 200-foot player, and we want him to be a power forward. And like, no, he's a goal scorer. Let the man score goals. And I kind of feel the same about Provorov. Of like, that's an offensive defenseman. Let him do that. But here we are. We're going to take another quick break, and then I want to take a look at how, like, will he be here in October? Should he be here in October? Will he get moved at the draft? Should he get moved at the draft? What kind of return could the Blue Jackets expect? Things like that. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Hello, and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, or welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets, I should say, because presumably you have been here the whole time. We're talking about Ivan Provorov today, and I want to talk about kind of his future on the team, and then I suppose I've got to give him a letter grade at the end of it. But we'll start off with, like, is this a piece that the Blue Jackets are going to look to trade at the draft? And I think yes, honestly. I think this is potentially going to be a piece that doesn't move until the new GM is in place, but it really depends on what the new GM, again, what does the new GM think of Provorov? What does the new GM think of the salary cap situation? Because, like, if you can move all of Provorov's contract, that's like over $4.5 million that you get to re-sign the young players. You have to fill that spot, but I think, David Jiricek should get a full-time NHL job next season. I think Denton Mateychuk should be challenging. I think if Adam Boqvist can stay healthy, he's there. Like, I think Jake Christensen should get a nice long look at not necessarily a full-time NHL spot next season, but that's another player that I would like them to take a look at in terms of can he be an NHL regular going forward? So it's not like if they move Provorov, they've got no one to fill that ice time, but I don't know that they're going to be able to move that entire contract. Do you retain 50%, just sit that $2.5 million on the books, and deal with that when it comes to it? Like, I think you'll probably get more back in the trade, but I guess that depends on, like, what do you value in this trade? Are you trading this just to get his contract off the books, in which case you'll probably accept less? Or do you think that you can potentially trade into the end of the first round, start of the second round, and then you can give Philadelphia that second round pick, get rid of that. You've got a fresh second round pick, it's a similar thing of, like, and I think, again, the Provorov trade likely depends on what some other moving parts do. Do they want to keep Jake Bean? Do they want to keep Alexander Texier? Do they move Elvis's contract? Like, do they move Adam Boqvist's contract? Do they move, like, again, I keep saying that Boone Jenner is not getting traded, but do they move that contract for more flexibility? It all kind of comes down to the next GM. But I could definitely see them being in conversations to move Provorov at the draft. I don't know, like, where he would go. I don't know what they would get back for him, but, like, I think if you retain 50% of Provorov, then you could probably get, like, a late first / early to mid second. Like, if you could get, like, between 30 and 40 overall for Provorov, and you retain 50%, I say yes immediately. And then it's okay. So what do you want for me to not retain? Is it a third round pick? Is it a fourth round pick conditional for, like, that becomes a third round pick if the team makes the final or makes the playoffs, or whatever, anything like that? Do you take a third round pick to just get rid of Ivan Provorov's contract? Like, I might take a fourth round pick to get rid of Ivan Provorov's contract. We'll see. But that's kind of where I'm at. I also could see them start the season with him still around, and if the Blue Jackets don't challenge for the playoffs next season, which I'm expecting them to be more competitive than this season, but I'm not expecting a playoff spot from this team next year. So I'm tempering my expectations, and if they make the playoffs, great. If not, then I won't be disappointed. But is he a deadline candidate to be moved then? Possibly. That's honestly, if I had to put money on it, that would be when I think he gets moved, and then there's less worry about having to retain for the rest of the season. You're likely to get more because trade deadline moves, I feel like always get more than draft moves. So again, really depends on the new GM coming in, whoever it is, what he thinks, what he wants to keep, who he wants to keep, whether he wants to burn the entire team to the ground and start from scratch. Who knows? But I could see Provorov moving at the draft. I could also see them keeping hold of him, and and he provides a little bit of insurance in case, for example, Dante Matejchuk is not ready to be a top 4 defenseman in the NHL, which he very well might not be. He might need some seasoning in the AHL. We won't know until he looks NHL ready last camp. He's just had a monster season with Moose Jaw. He's going to the Memorial Cup. Just won the MVP of the playoffs, the WHL, but development isn't linear, especially for baby defensemen. So I could see them keeping Provorov around as insurance if any of their young defensemen are not quite ready, or if they decide to move on from Jake Bean or Boquist or whoever, like lots of moving parts. All this to say, I would move Provorov, but I don't know that the team will. In terms of like his overall grade, we'll finish up with that. Like honestly, I'm giving him a C, maybe a C plus. I think he was fine offensively, kind of a disaster defensively, but again, not entirely his fault because he was put in situations that were not entirely of his own making, and sometimes he got burnt because he made stupid decisions or he like mentally checked out. Like I saw a handful of goals this season where he just like threw the puck away in his own zone and then didn't do anything and then just skated toward the bench, and the tying goal or the game-winning goal or whatever was scored, or like, so he made a bunch of stupid decisions, but he also was not put in the best position to succeed by the coaching staff. So I'm fine with that C plus. It's maybe a little bit harsh, but it's my podcast and that's the grade I'm giving him. So if you disagree, I'm sure I'll hear about it in the comments. But that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow we've got another prospect profile with Sebastian High of Locked On NHL Prospect and Dobber Prospect. We're talking about Igor Chernyshov, who is a very interesting prospect. We also talk a little bit about Gavin Brindley, who is currently tearing it up at the World Championship. Not tearing it up. He scored a goal today as of the time of recording this. I'm recording this on Sunday for people who are interested in that kind of look behind the curtain. But we talk a little bit about prospect news, just in general. We talk about Igor Chernyshov, who's a very interesting prospect that probably won't be on Blue Jackets' radar, but I want to talk about him anyway for a bunch of reasons. That's tomorrow's episode. Thank you for listening to this episode, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. If you want to get in touch, I'm on Twitter at _ Jacob Foster, JAKOB. The show is at LO _ Blue Jackets on Twitter and over on Instagram. Then you can email us at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, for being an everydayer. You guys are great, even though it's the depths of the off season and nothing interesting has happened in like a month and a half. You guys are still turning up, and I appreciate that. Until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.